very warm welcome, Vijay Kumar sir. Gopalakrishnan sir வந்து நம்ம அப்படியே 60s, 70s கொண்டு போயிட்டு அப்படியே கொஞ்சம் 80s, 90s கொண்டு வந்தாரு. So I am hoping that in the next 20-25 minutes you will take us to the 20s, 20s and 20s, 30s. Right? So, all fasten your seatbelt. We are going to have a great ride. So we'll start with your childhood days. Right? Just give some background in terms of how they were before you got into PhD.
Yeah. Good evening, all of you, and it's really very nice to see a lot of senior alumni as well as some of the younger alumni. It's very nice to see, and I'm really happy to have this honor to be here and talking to all of you today. So let me take on from what Nambi asked me. I was born and brought up in Coimbatore. Obviously, PhD Tech is also there. I did my schooling in Coimbatore and Ooty. I spent about 6 years in Ooty and 7-8 years studying in Coimbatore before I joined PhD Tech. Come from a very modest middle-class family. My parents were very hardworking and they believed a lot in investing in education, and that was the major investment they made. So from there, after I finished my 12th, I joined PhD Tech. I was a day scholar, mostly studious kind of person. If you know, in PhD Tech, you generally have broadly two kinds of people. One set of people who are very studious, and the other set who are a little more fun-loving, and typically the day scholars are the studious kind, and the hostel, most of them, they tend to enjoy life a little bit more and have a lot of party and fun. And in Coimbatore, I think there are just two things. If you want to go out, either you will go for a movie or you will go to a temple. Right? These are the two main things. And the studious ones will go to temple before the exams, and will go for a movie after the exams. And the fun-loving people would see a lot of movies all through, and they will go to Marudamalai after the exam. So that's how the college life was. I'm sure everybody has different stories to tell, but it broadly fits into these two buckets, I would largely say. So that's pretty much college and childhood.
நம்ம நேற்று மீட் பண்ணும்போது நீங்கள் சொன்னீங்க எனக்கு ரொம்ப ஸ்டூடியஸ் ஸோ அதனால் காலேஜில் அந்த அளவுக்கு பட் I think one good thing I think Ratna also mentioned, right? I think you are a great example of how good boys win. So நேற்று அதுவும் நீங்கள் மென்ஷன் பண்ணீங்க இல்லையா இப்போ நாங்கள்லாம் சென்னையில் இருக்கோம் பட் we don't get that many chances to even go to Coimbatore, but you still diligently நீங்கள் 3 வாட்டி கோயம்புத்தூர் போகிறீங்க, right? அப்போது 90s நீங்கள் வளர்ந்த கோயம்புத்தூருக்கும் இப்போது நீங்கள் போகிற கோயம்புத்தூருக்கும் எப்படி இருக்கு?
I'm sure many of you know Coimbatore. Coimbatore is one of the nice places with very good climate. If you really look at many cities in the world, there are not too many cities like Coimbatore. And some good industries. It used to have, earlier, a lot of textile and engineering and mechanical industries were very prominent. Even today, there is a lot of good work that happens, including some work which went into cars like Nano and all that. The core work was done on Coimbatore. But I think over the years, of course, the weather is still one of the better ones compared to many other cities. But I think the industry is slightly changing. I think it's really emerged well as a tier 2 IT services destination. I think there are possibly more than 35,000 people in the tech sector working for different companies. But we wish it has evolved a little bit more. With the potential that Coimbatore had, it could have become a major auto hub, because the automobile engineering and the core brains behind a lot of this actually kind of emanated out of PSG and the mechanical and the industrial institute and all of that. So with that kind of strength and the intellect on the mechanical side, it could have become a world-renowned auto hub, but unfortunately that bus is missed. But I do believe it continues to emerge as a good services destination as we move forward.
நீங்கள் சொல்கிறத பார்த்தா போஸ்ட் HCL ஆல்ரெடி ஒரு பிளான் வச்சுருக்க மாதிரி இருக்கு. So let's talk about your career, right? So முடிச்சிட்டு நீங்க வந்துட்டு first C.ல you started 4 years, right? அந்த காலத்துல government job probably, right? So what made you move to HCL?
C.dot was really an autonomous telecom R&D institution. It was set up to develop indigenous technologies, because before that, all the telephone exchanges, all the equipments were largely, the technology was designed by foreign companies, and there is some little bit of manufacturing was done by ITI. So C.dot was set up to build the indigenous technology. So a lot of interesting things was happening, and it was more R&D, and it really felt like it was an extension of the college life. So a lot of interesting things, a lot of young people. We developed satellite communication, modulators, demodulators, QPSK, all some things which we learned in digital signal processing we could implement. So it felt like an extension of the lab. And so it was a good, enjoyable 4 years. But at that time, a lot of multinationals were coming into Bangalore. So a lot of people with some good experience would move into some of the MNCs. So that was the time when I had an opportunity to join HCL. HCL at that time had a project around the satellite communication to connect all the traders of National Stock Exchange. National Stock Exchange itself was set up post Manmohan Singh's reforms in 1990. It came into being in 93, 94. So there was a very interesting project, and that's what attracted me. And there was a lot of correlation between what I had done in C.dot from a design perspective, and this project was really an implementation of some of that. So that's what.
நேற்று நீங்க அந்த ப்ராஜெக்ட் பேசும்போது உங்க கண்ணில் ஒரு ஸ்பார்க் இருந்தது. Okay, and can you give a little more details on what that project and how exciting it was?
Yeah. See that if you look at 80s and even early 90s, when people wanted to buy shares, they would go to the floor, like in Bombay Stock Exchange floor, they will shout name of a company and so many shares they want to buy. It might look very archaic, but that is how trading was happening. And then that is when there were scams and things like that which happened. So it was, as a part of economic reforms, one of the strategy was to really bring in an automatic trading network which can be accessed from anywhere in India. First is to implement a technology and the software to kind of do the automatic trading. The second one was to implement a network. As India was such a spread out country, there was not much of good terrestrial landline communications. Of course, cell phones came much, much later. So there was no good networking capability, so we had to use satellite communication. So we used satellite communication, and we had imported the technology from a couple of companies, one in US and another one in Israel. And we brought it, implemented, and actually the project had a deadline, 3rd of November 1994. That was the Diwali day. And Diwali, before the day Diwali, there is a training session which happens. So they had all announced it even 1 year back. They're going to launch this new system. So we had to work backwards, including buying technology, doing all the testing, implementing. And the last minute, the government was to allocate the satellite transponder for this communication. And in the last minute, they changed the transponder. So which means we had to realign a lot of systems, fine-tuning, all of that had to be done. But we still went live exactly around the Muhurat trading time on 12 November. So it was a very proud moment for India, for HCL, and I was the key technical person implementing that network. So it was obviously a very proud moment.
இங்க இருக்கிற மில்லியன்ஸ்லாம் கேட்க போறாங்க, என்ன 2020s and 2030s கூட்டிட்டு போறேன், நீங்க இன்னும் இன்டர்நெட் பத்தி பேசிட்டு இருக்கீங்களே அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு. So I mean 25 years we have come a long way, right? 1994 struggles in even getting communication lines to where we are today, right? அதே 25 years தான் நீங்க almost HCL ஸ்பெண்ட் பண்ணிருக்கீங்க.
Yes, I joined just when the project started.
So அந்த 25 years journey பத்தி கொஞ்சம்.
Sure. See, I'm sure some of you know HCL is a very entrepreneurial company, right? And every person who's joined HCL in the early days, they all came up with some good ideas and built those ideas into big businesses. There is a strategy which later was called as the blue ocean strategy, right? You look at new things in a completely new market and build a business, rather than going into areas where there is already a lot of competition. It used to be, we call it as uncontested market spaces. So satellite communication was one such thing. So there was a new subsidiary which was set up to address this. It was called Comnet, HCL Comnet, and I joined HCL Comnet. And while the business was new, company was new, we also were very brave to bid for the largest project in the country to connect all the trading brokers into the trading network. So that was a very exciting project, and that was very successful, and that gave me a lot of confidence. And then I went on to take other responsibilities, satellite communication, to the broader network communication solutions and services. And that was called the infrastructure business. And we quickly realized that just focusing on Indian market with these solutions is not going to make us a big company. So we quickly kind of established presence in the global markets to sell and service the global customers on what is called as infrastructure management. We call it as remote infrastructure management. Typically companies like IBM, HP, CSC, these were the companies which were managing infrastructure for a lot of global companies. So through these new ideas, we had kind of taken over a lot of those contracts. And this business was a huge success for HCL. It started with one project in National Stock Exchange. It was at that time a 5 crore project, and today it's a $3.5 billion business. It's a very large business. So I think as the business grew, it was a very fast growing business. I took on various responsibilities and I grew with the business. I think I worked very hard and kept very singular focus around whatever the assignments were given.
அந்த காலேஜில் படிக்கிற பசங்க சொன்ன ஒரு அனாலஜி மாதிரியே இருக்குது. So in 2016 you become COO, I think, right? And HCL had a very good succession planning, I guess, right? And the history பார்த்தீங்கன்னா usually on the COO post பண்ணிட்டு I think they give almost 6 months and then you give it that person to the CEO. But உங்க கேஸ்ல வந்துட்டு press reports said like it happened very sudden, right? And what was planned. So what are the initial challenges?
See, I think if you look at 2016 and 2014, 15, 16, they were actually very difficult years for the IT industry because the industry used to grow at 30-40% year on year. We used to recruit a lot of people every year from colleges, and there was no looking back. It was just growing like crazy. But a lot of new technologies came in, and automation had picked up significantly. And there is a new theme of digitalization, cloud, all the new technologies were just changing the landscape of services. And the growth rate had come down to maybe a single digit. Companies which are growing 30-40% had come down to 7-8% growth. And this industry, if it is not growing, you will not be able to absorb more new talent. And then the cost structures go out of control. So the business becomes less and less attractive. So industry was going through a very, very difficult time. And even before I became the COO, I was part of defining the blueprint on how we address these challenges. How can we look at all the new technology changes and evolve from traditional services to new generation services. And I think that role I played for a few months just helped kind of bring together a lot of capabilities in HCL into what then we called it as a Mode 1, 2, 3 strategy. Where we kind of grouped all the traditional services into one category, and all the modern services like Internet of Things, cloud, digital, analytics, machine learning, AI, all those into a separate group, and put very senior, very capable, highly technical kind of leaders to drive those businesses. And I think that was the organization change that happened around the time, and which kind of gave us the next leg of growth from there on.
And the mode 1, 2, 3, the way you have defined it is a little interesting. For most of the IT services companies, all those and the digitalization is on 3 years. But I think you have moved it into mode 2, and interestingly has put products in mode 3, right? So where does that thought process come from?
If you see, if you take the Fortune 500 companies 30 years back and today, almost half of the companies have disappeared. That's primarily because every company has to constantly reinvent itself, right? I mean, all of us are aware of Kodak camera and similarly Nokia cell phones so that if you don't really reinvent yourself and adopt yourself to all the changes that are happening, then you will go down and you will lose your status. So with that in mind, we focused on a long-term plan where you not only focus on the current services, how do you modernize and keep innovating on the current services, and also create a completely new business for the future, which may really become big in 5 years or 10 years, but it needs nurturing very early. So that's how we came to a simple strategy. We call it as Mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, where Mode 1 is just focus on all your existing services and continue to nurture them, make them more automated, bring more innovation around the traditional services. And the second one is Mode 2, which is the future, which is about how can you use all the new technologies and create a business advantage. Like if you see a lot of companies today, whether it is Uber or Facebook, and a lot of these companies have just used the digital platforms to create a completely new business model. And I'm sure there are lots of examples here like Paytm and Flipkart and many of them. They kind of use digital platforms to kind of disrupt a traditional business and create a completely new business. So that's how Mode 1 and Mode 2. And Mode 2 had a lot of technologies. We put specific focus, invested in building those capabilities. And Mode 1 and 2 are largely services businesses. So what we believe is in the long run, services will continue to get commoditized. So we should invest in something which is going to really be a big pillar of growth 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And we looked at all the opportunities in the market, and we believe that software products is where the maximum profit pool is there in the industry. And India traditionally had a services footprint, and HCL had a lot of capability in building products for a lot of global companies. So why not use the product engineering capability and really build a software business? So that's what the Mode 3 was. So one was now, which is Mode 1, which is happening now. Mode 2 is midterm, which is something which will really evolve in the next 3-4 years. And Mode 3 is a much more longer horizon. I think just categorizing into the three and putting the right leadership and right investments focus, that helps you to create a blueprint for a much longer term.
And you have placed a 1.8 billion bet on your Mode 3, right? Those who have been following HCL and the recent news, HCL vandittu or 1.8 billion. Ratna, can you convert that into rupees, please? So, 15,000 crores. So they have placed a 15,000 crore bet. They have bought this 7 suite of products from IBM into HCL, right? So that's like a huge bet, right? Does that reflect your leadership style as well? Placing big bets. What is your leadership style? Like, Ratna mentioned, it has been mentioned by management guru David G. Thompson in his book as well, right?
Yeah, there are two aspects. One is what is your personal leadership. I mean, how do you really deal with your day-to-day things? And of course, on the business side, how are you really looking at different opportunities, and are you really taking a very precise and focused approach? I do not have any major management gurus kind of leadership approach, but very simple things which I think helps everybody in day-to-day life. One is trust. I mean, you really pick people who are competent, they're very committed to what they have to do, and then trust them, give them enough responsibilities, and not really micromanage, and really enable them to be successful. And in fact, if you see HCL's, one of the philosophies is employee first, customer second, which is really focusing on enabling your people to deliver their best. And that's how the management looks at the responsibility on themselves to kind of enable and enthuse people so that they really deliver very good outcomes in front of the customers. So that was the, basic philosophy was about trust. I follow it very consistently across. Pick good people, very committed and competent people, and kind of enable them. That's one. And second, of course, is the empathy. I mean, while everybody works very hard and there are a lot of business priorities, you often have to take tough decisions. So you usually, I put myself in the other shoes a little bit and think, how will this decision or how will this strategy impact somebody else, some business group or outcome. And usually you come up with a much more considered answer when you really put yourself in the other person's shoes. I think that's one thing which has been very constant. And of course, integrity is something we are very, very committed to, and we don't tolerate any wrong practices and things like that. We take very, very firm decisions. So integrity is extremely critical. So just these are fairly basic things, but if you're able to implement it, it helps you to be a moral compass to kind of drive the right behavior in the organization, especially when the organization becomes very large. Some of these principles, whether it is employee first or trust and transparency, empathize with people and high integrity, these are very critical for us to scale and kind of embed these principles all across the organization. From a business side, once we defined the strategy, we did not really look back. We said keep the strategy simple, put a lot of emphasis on execution. And I think that's what helped us. If you see the last 3 years, HCL has been the fastest growing technology services company in the world. If you take all the companies above $5 million, HCL comes on the top. So from a time in the industry where the growth was becoming difficult and industry was struggling, we have been able to reinvent ourselves. The collective leadership, a lot of effort has gone, and we made all the right investments, and we seem to be in a good spot now.
With the PSG at the helm of us, it shouldn't be a surprise.
I'm sure all of you know Shiv Nadar, who was the chairman. He's a 1967 alumni of PSG Tech. In fact, when I went to PSG Tech, they said Shiv Nadar and Vijay Kumar are the same batch. But the reality is he passed out of in 1967 and I was born in 1967.
So coming back to products, in the early this year, Indian government actually announced a national policy for software products, right? I think our Honorable Prime Minister also made a statement that this industry has to transform. Of course, you have been a visionary in probably doing that maybe 3 years back in coming with the Mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, right? And the policy, 1,500 crore they have allocated. For 2025, the government wants 10,000 technology startups, right? Some 3.5 million jobs, direct and indirect, to be generated and things like that. But as I said, being a visionary, you have already started that journey. So what will be the challenges for India in reaching those goals by 2025?
See, India traditionally, if you look at the technology side, we have been primarily focused on services, which means either you do an outsourced service for one of the product companies, which is in the US or Europe or in other parts of the world. And so from the services, I think services has run its course. It will continue to modernize itself, some new services will come in. But the next phase of growth, with so much happening on the technology side, is all around intellectual property. Right? I mean, like startups which create new ideas, bring those ideas into products and create multi-billion-dollar businesses out of them. I think that is going to be the next big growth. Unfortunately, over the last 30 years, while the technology industry has grown, there's very little growth which has happened on the product side. And we have developed a lot of IPs and patents for foreign companies, but very little of that has been done for Indian companies themselves. So I think it's a right thing to focus on products, a government initiative as well. But all the companies will have to reinvent with creating intellectual property which they can encash in. The same technology can be used in multiple areas and they get royalties and things like that. I think that is going to be the next evolution. And the challenge is, I think the startup ecosystem will have to become a lot more vibrant. I think with the government support, I think it's definitely, not only government, the industry and academics, all of them are highly encouraging the whole startup ecosystem in various parts of the country. So I think we're in the early phases of creating patents, IPs, and I do believe in the next 10 years, you will see some very, very successful big product companies evolving out of India, which has a very global impact at a very large scale.
Hopefully that will help with the 5 trillion GDP that we are aiming for as well, right? And the aspect of touch funding, skill is a very important thing, right? The technology industry in the last 25 years, right, has been driven primarily by the human resources that we are able to generate. But in the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of noise, right? Thousands of engineers are coming out, but they are not coming with the skills that the industry needs, right? How do you view this? How is HCL dealing with this if it is a real problem?
I'm sure academic institutions are kind of continuing to follow a certain path, and the curriculum is evolving. Maybe it's evolving at a slightly slower pace than what the real industry demands are. However, it's not just the fresh graduates who are coming and how applicable are their skills into the new business. But a lot of people who are already in the industry, they also are getting a little bit redundant if they don't invest in a lot of learning and upgrading themselves. In fact, I always say this quote to all the team members: the illiterate of the 21st century is not the one who cannot read or write, but it's the one who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Life is it's a continuous learning, right? Most of the people focus on maybe they do your academic education and after that they get on to work, but the emphasis to learn new things will have to be continuously embedded in every individual. If you don't do it, you will get outdated, and in technology world we call what is called as outmachine. Right? A lot of work can be done by robots. Machine learning, AI can kind of replace a lot of regular routine work that you do. So there is a constant need to learn new technologies. Like Internet of Things is a huge, there is an explosion of connected devices. Like everything is connected, whether it is cars or your consumer goods at home. So each one is connected. So today we have $6 billion devices which are connected to the internet. But in the next 5 years, there's going to be 50 billion devices which will get connected to the internet. So there is huge amount of data which is getting produced. So from traditional technology skills, data science and AI and analytics is going to become a big thing. So I think continuously people will have to kind of keep themselves updated. And even the fresh college students, I think if you look at the requirements, I think data science and analytics is going to be a huge thing. There's already a shortfall of over 100,000 people in analytics space. And in the next 3 years, there's going to be a shortfall of close to 300,000 people in analytics. And even in advanced countries like US, close to 50% of the positions on analytics are getting filled. The rest is going unfulfilled. So while technology is changing, I think if you can focus on skilling people in the right areas, so I think the industry will continue to be a big recruiter of talent. I strongly believe that transformation is something which should not only happen in the institutions, academic institutions, but all the companies will have to reinvest in retraining their people to continue to make them or keep them relevant in the new areas.
90s coding கற்றுக்கிட்டோம் சார். அப்புறம் அப்படியே எண்டு 90s வரும்போது பீப்புள் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் கற்றுக்கிட்டோம். அப்புறமா கொஞ்சம் அந்த ஆஃப் ஷோர் டெவலப்மெண்ட், ப்ராடக்ட் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் கற்றுக்கிட்டோம். வயசாகுது சார். But anyway, we'll try to take your advice and keep unlearning and learning, right? So thank you for that. So one more criticism, பார்த்தீங்கன்னா இப்போ நீங்க சொல்ற அந்த data science, analytics, product, all those stuff can be related probably to what is happening in the manufacturing world also, right? In the last 2 years, பார்த்தீங்கன்னா a lot of buzz again on jobless growth, right? Industries are growing, top line is growing, bottom line is growing. The number of jobs does not seem to be growing, right? Where do you think this is, again, do you agree with that? If you agree with that, where do you think this is going?
I think in all industries, automation to a large extent replaces a lot of routine labor kind of work. And it's very important we continue to automate and optimize and bring in a lot of lean practices, because you have to be competitive in the global market because everyone is doing it. So there is no going away from it. You need to automate, that will eliminate a lot of labor. But there is equal emphasis, as I said, on retraining labor to be doing new things. Even in the technology world or manufacturing world, I'm sure a lot of new roles are getting created, and that's where we should focus and train our people so that people have a productive career of 30, 40 years. But they will possibly do 4 or 5 jobs in the lifespan. Today's engineers who are graduating, they would not be doing the same job or even the similar job for the next 30 years. They will go through 3 or 4 career transitions, and which means they will have to reinvent themselves. And that's not only true in the technology side, whether it is manufacturing or chemical, all industries are continuously getting disrupted. So I think that you've got to keep pace with that. I think that's going to be very important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijay Kumar. It's been a real privilege sitting with you on this dais, and congratulations on, I think you said like you hit a 10 billion mark, run rate mark,
Not yet.
Okay, all the best for hitting that mark pretty soon, and we probably have questions from the audience.
Before we open the floor for the questions, we would like to recognize the presence of Ms. Tina Kumari, Deputy Collector, who has completed her BTech IT in 2005. Yes. Thank you. And now the floor is open for questions. For short of time, we can take up like very few questions. Yeah, once.
I can't hear you.
Please wait for the mic.
Sir, it is very nice to hear that you have linked the stock exchanges all over India where the software is, benefit is being felt. My question is this, sir. There is not a single Indian software for design of engineering products, electrical, mechanical, or even civil. You have AutoCAD, you have Solid Edge, you have CATIA, but not one Indian software. Why, sir?
Yeah, so I think I explained it, right? Indian companies, a lot of them focused on services. They did not build software products. Possibly some of the products that you're talking about, the coding and testing, all of that was done by some of the technologists from India, but they did not really build it and package it into a full-fledged product. So I think services, there was a huge demand. Every company kept on growing with services. So they did not feel the need to kind of venture out and do something different. But I can see now a lot of companies are looking at creating software products. I mean, that's really the point that I made. The next phase of evolution in the industry is not only modernizing services, but creating products which we can supply to the global companies and Indian companies.
Okay, I'm Sanat Kumar. I'm not a private sector fellow. So, since you have been in a big private sector company, I'm curious to ask a question. Does this rule of 2080 operate in your company? What I mean to say is 20% of the people do the work of 80%. And if you take those 20% and create, just a minute, let me finish. If you take those 20% and put them in a room and then say you work, that becomes 2080. It seems to be a human nature thing. Have you run into this problem?
Yeah, definitely. I think in any group, the top performing or the people who contribute, I mean, they tend to do a lot of work. But I think over the period of time, I think it's possibly, it's not 20-80, but what we can call it as 30, 40, and 30, right? 30% really are high performers, very high productivity, very high outcome, lot of innovation. But we also need the next 40% who carry the bulk of a lot of other things which may not be so exciting, but you still need the right talent to do those things. And the 30% are the people who possibly will need a lot of push and a lot of training, a lot of further kind of review and things like that. So it's not typically the 80-20, but I would say you need 30-40-30 is the right kind of metric.
If they don't spoil the other fellow's work, it's good.
That's true, practically.
Good. Mr. Vijay Kumar? Sorry, thanks. During the 80s, HCL was into HCL, HXL, HIL, etc. Now, do you still do anything in hardware?
No, we do very little. We don't do anything in
Why?
hardware.
Why?
See, hardware, I think we were, eventually, we were not very competitive, right? There is global volumes. Indian market itself was not so big to create the huge volumes and be competitive. So there is a lot of global companies, and so we kind of moved from hardware to software services. But now we are further moving into software products.
So probably you were not from tech, I would ask this. Now, should I take it that HCL found it easier to make more money in services than in manufacturing?
I think it's all about market opportunity, right? Because eventually, see, what is important is, we feel so proud about employing 150,000 people, right? If you can have your vision of trying to create more jobs and create more footprint, I think that's a bigger cost. And of course, it comes with services and revenue and profits, but I think services industry has helped so much of job creation. So I think that's what I would say.
You mentioned a very good point about products that we haven't in India thought of too much products. Having worked in two industries, one of your things. For 10 years, I was a structural engineer in LAT. After some time, I was a contracts engineer in a software company, and then I did a lot of engineering, software design, and now I'm in some business development activities. Let's say. Having worked also in a small product company for Europe, I noticed that much smaller companies in Europe, or maybe even in US, seem to be able to develop products and get IP. But how do you see it differently? Because obviously you pointed out that building a product seems to be more difficult. How is it they are managing it with smaller groups? Do they have a different infrastructure?
No, I think it's not about infrastructure. I think you need to have the right environment for innovation, and people have to have the right, you need to identify the right problem statement on which you're going to build, or you need to solve a real life problem. I'm sure Indian companies and engineers are extremely capable. I'm sure they've created a lot of products which made a lot of global companies extremely successful. So I think if we start focusing on it, I'm sure we will build some very good products.
What do you mean, or the institution, you should start from them, whatever institution, so we are not investing so much on the research. One thing is that
our universities are not investing, or they are not promoting a lot of research. That is why we say that in the top 100 universities, India doesn't figure out. So you mean say that all these things are interconnected, the IP creation and the academies and the institutions' contribution?
See, the university ecosystem has been a very good breeding ground for innovation and products. But I think they keep that as one more objective, whereas I'm not sure if the institutions in India have so much of focus in trying to enable more innovation which can be launched as products. So a lot of startups and institutions work very closely globally. Maybe there is a need to do a little bit more of that in our ecosystem as well.
Thank you, sir. Maybe two more questions. One second.
Sir, really lucky to be
Sir,
here.
one minute, sir.
Now, you said first employed first, then customer later. This is joined by Mr. Vinit Nayak earlier.
Right.
Now, this is factory thing. Customer decides your plate. He gives you bread and butter. Is it really true, that statement?
No, see, I think it's like this. In a services company, where is the value getting created? It's getting created at the interface of our employees with our customers. So if you do all the right things to motivate and enthuse and enable our employees, and if you keep that as your focus, then automatically they are a lot more motivated, and when they interact and enable the customers, then the value creation is much more accelerated. So it doesn't mean that customer is second. It's a much more sophisticated way of delivering higher value to your clients. So we start from the root, because ultimately the services industry really depends on people to deliver a set of services and think differently, create more value. So I think that's how we kind of inverted the whole story and said employee first. And that kind of creates a very good organizational commitment to do all the right thing for the employees. And then you succeed.
Yeah, hi CVK, this is Ram. I'm from HCL Technologies. Yeah, so I'm part of the M&A team. I work with Ramesh Menon. And I have two questions for you. One question is that there's a lot of fear and anxiety of the developed markets as well as the European countries going to recession. So how do you feel the IT services are going to navigate it? And second is, we have seen Modi government going for a corporate tax cut yesterday, similar to what Trump did in 2015. So do you see any increase in the M&A activity in IT services per se, because the valuations are going to be much cheaper now?
See, I mean, I think globally, I think the situation is quite tight, right? Because European countries' interest rates have become negative. US is not in recession, but the growth rate has come down, interest rates have come down. So there is going to be significant stress in the industry, not just because of just the economy, but the trade situation between US and China. That's going to put a lot of pressure on several large US companies, so they will cut down on some spending, which will have some downstream impact. But in all this, one very important thing is for every company to survive and do well, they have to invest a lot in technology, right? I mean, in whatever form and shape, whichever industry you are in, investment in technology is going to help you modernize. When I say technology, is not just IT, but whether it is manufacturing or 5G from telecom or all new things help kind of reinvent industries. And I think all the big industries realize that they need to continue to invest for them to be relevant in the future. So while this recession or a little bit of slowdown may happen, I don't think the commitment to invest in technology is going to, it may moderate a little bit, but it will still be a lot of investments into technology. So I don't think it will have a material impact. There can be some blips, but in the mid to long term, I think it is still strong. Of course, this tax cuts is going to help. More than the IT industry, I think it is going to help the manufacturing industry, because the IT industry already had tax exemptions. So if you look at the tax exempted, most companies were paying between 20 and 25%. So I think it will more or less remain the same. I don't think it will change a lot for any of the big IT companies. But manufacturing companies, I think they definitely have more money to invest. If they're going to pay less tax, their ability to invest will be more. I'm sure some of them will look at M&A. Some of them will expand the manufacturing base. I think manufacturing is going to be a huge opportunity for India, given the trade tensions between US and China. If India was really prepared to take on a lot of high quality manufacturing, we could have hugely encashed on this opportunity, and it would have, this 5 trillion would have not been such a difficult one. But it's not still late. I think this will help to create a little bit of traction, but I think a lot of other things like infrastructure improvements and the movement of goods and exports, all of that has to fall in place. And a culture of very high quality manufacturing needs to get embedded. I mean, India has not really succeeded at a global level in high quality manufacturing, just like some of the Southeast Asian countries have been. I think that culture is something which we'll have to build on, and that will make us quite successful there.
Again, I have two more questions, sir. But these two questions are entirely different, two different things. One is like your profile says you're from EEE, but then your career moved on to CDOT, which is like telecommunication and satellite communication projects. So were you interested in communication from your college days, or how challenging was it to adopt to communication subject? And I'm not finished.
So though I did EEE, I had one elective called digital signal processing, and I used to hate that actually. I I used to hate it so much that I just wanted to somehow get through that. But as life may have it, once you really get onto a job, then you learn to like it. And once I started working, of course, networking and communication was a very interesting area. So.
Okay, and my second question is that Ratna mentioned you working on something like gender-related things and all that. And we hear Sheryl Sandberg saying only 14% of the top leadership is women. So, can you tell me, like, what do you do about it? Like, is the situation going to change anytime sooner?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'm sure, I mean, one good thing I saw was even the Office Bearers of Alumni Association, now we have women representation. I think, I strongly believe we are losing out on a lot of talent by not equally tapping into male and female population. So I think, in my view, most companies should have a balance of 50-50. Because, I mean, if you were very neutral, if you didn't have any bias, you will eventually be able to treat men and women equally, give them all the right opportunities. So today we are not like that, especially in the tech sector, it's probably maybe 20-80. So you're actually missing out on a whole lot of talent which could contribute to this industry. That's one. Number two is diversity while it is nice to say we need to have a diverse team and men and women and racial diversity and all that, I do think it really helps the business. Because even if I have a meeting and have 3 or 4 women colleagues and 4 or 5 men colleagues, versus a meeting if I have with all men colleagues, the conversations get a lot more productive if you have a very diverse group. Right? It's very simple. I mean, have different thought process, bring a differentiated thinking. So we should all encourage diversity in all areas of what we are doing. And I'm a very strong believer in that. And I think all the industries are working towards enhancing diversity. I think there were some rules like every board of directors should have 1 women director. These are some small beginnings, but we have a long, long way to go. And I'm very confident that this ratio will continue to improve as we move.
Last question, madam.
No question, no, it's not a question. Just an answer, it was a question to sir, but I just like to add one point there. We always have the question, whether it's in private service or in government service, why is the ratio of women very less? Okay, am I audible? Like, even here the representation is very, very less. But I would really say, there is, ma'am, I'm from the government sector, I've been in IT for 7 years, in government for 5 years. So I know both the sectors to some extent, okay? That push to work should come from the lady. No government, no private service, no company, no CEO can insist that. Unless and until I feel that I have to work, I have the confidence to balance my family and work, and when the push comes from the person, it's not from me. Even if you see the person sitting right next to me is Dean Placements of an engineering college. She has 2 kids. She takes care of the kids and she takes, it's just an example. She works, her parents also. So, it has to come from the lady. No system can change that. I'll just try to record this. No giving 33%, 25%, nothing. Only if the lady wants to work, she'll work. Otherwise, she cannot make her work.
Thank you, ma'am. Just have one request. Right? Of course, Vijay Kumar sir is going to be here for dinner. So, when we want them, right, what kind of questions could come? We said expect a lot of naughty questions, right? And I think Selva started with the 2 crore demand, right? What I'm trying to say is, please keep this in mind that it's a privilege for us to have someone like Mr. Vijay Kumar here with us. We should respect each other's space, right? So please have a good conversation with him, right? There's no point in being very aggressive with him and asking a lot of those kind of things. As I said, right, it's a privilege to have him here. Let's try to have a good conversation with him and let's respect his space, okay? Thank you.
So sir, we just want to give a small momentum.